Forget the polished Hollywood pirates with their eyeliner and quirky charm. What I'm about to tell you is darker, bloodier, and far more terrifying than anything you've seen on a movie screen. Imagine the Caribbean not as a tourist's paradise of beaches and rum cocktails, but as a furnace of violence where nations clashed through shadows and desperate men carved out fleeting kingdoms from blood and fire. Picture yourself standing on the deck of a creaking ship, sails billowing against a midnight sky as the sea heaves like a living beast beneath you. The smell of salt and gunpowder fills your lungs, and every creak of timber could be the last before cannon fire rips your world apart. Here's the truth no one dares to whisper in polite company. Pirates were not romantic rogues. They were men driven to the edge by betrayal, hunger, and greed. They were slaves who had broken their chains, sailors abandoned by kings who had promised protection but delivered only poverty, outcasts who forged their own laws on the open sea, and their rules were not written in ink but in blood. They flew the Jolly Roger not to amuse, but to terrify, because when that black flag rose, it meant no quarter, none, and yet their story is more complicated than murder and plunder. These so-called villains built floating democracies where captains were elected, loot divided fairly, and every man had a voice. In the shadows of empire, pirates were creating the kind of freedom the world's kings feared most. But freedom always comes with a price, and for the pirates of the Caribbean, that price was betrayal, torture, and the noose. So when you hear the waves whispering beneath the Caribbean moonlight, remember this: every island, every reef, every hidden cove still remembers the screams, the fire, the gold that never made it home. And if you think you know how the story ends, you don't, because the greatest pirate tale is not about treasure, it's about survival. And it begins not with a black flag, but with a ship limping into Tortuga, her crew starving, and her captain carrying a secret so dangerous it could topple empires. The ship crawled into Tortuga like a ghost, her sails ragged, her hull patched with scars from battles fought far from friendly waters, her crew gaunt and hollow-eyed, clutching their cutlasses as though the sea itself might rise to swallow them. The town greeted them with its usual chaos guns fired in drunken celebration. Laughter spilled from tavern doors, women called out from balconies, and merchants hawked stolen goods in voices hoarse with greed. Tortuga never slept. It merely shifted from one fever to the next. At the helm stood Captain Adrian Vane, his hair wild from salt spray, his jaw shadowed with days of unshaven grit. He was not a man of grandeur, but there was a weight in his stare, a fire that had seen kingdoms rise and burn in the same breath. His men called him cursed, some whispered blessed, but all followed him, because he had kept them alive when wiser men had drowned. As the Morning Star docked, the crew stumbled ashore, half drunk on relief, before rum even touched their lips. They scattered into the night like wolves loosed from a cage, vanishing into taverns that pulsed with lantern glow and raucous song. Vane, however, walked with deliberate calm, Marlowe, the quartermaster, dogging his heels. Old Marlowe, scarred and bent, but sharp as ever, muttered low, "Word travels fast here, Captain. They'll know about the raid before we've swallowed our first drink." Vane grunted. "Let them know. We bled for that gold." "Aye," Marlowe rasped, his voice like gravel, "but you and I both know this ain't just about gold." Vane's jaw tightened. In his coat, hidden close to his heart, was not coin nor gem, but a scroll sealed with red wax. a secret so dangerous it was worth more than all the treasure of the Indies. He had not told the crew what they had truly taken, nor the kingdoms that would hunt them for it. The Serpent's Fang Tavern roared with life as they entered, its floors slick with spilled ale, its rafters groaning with laughter, curses, and shanties. The air reeked of sweat, gunpowder, and cheap perfume. Every table was alive with dice, cards, and deals whispered through crooked smiles. But when Captain Vane entered, the noise dipped just for a heartbeat, as if the room itself knew something walked among them that was not entirely of this world. Then the roar returned, louder than ever, and mugs were raised in his direction. A barmaid pressed rum into his hand, her eyes wide with curiosity, but Vane hardly tasted it. He scanned the crowd, searching for threats and allies alike, and found both staring back at him. Rival captains with eyes sharp as blades, merchants who smiled too icily, and in the far corner, a man cloaked in shadows, his gaze fixed on Vane with unsettling patience. "Captain," Marlowe muttered, following his eyes. "That one's been waiting for you." Vane set down his mug. "Then let's not keep him long." They crossed the tavern, boots thudding against boards scarred by decades of fights and betrayals. The man looked up as they approached, his smile thin but confident. His coat was finer than most in Tortuga, though travel-worn, and his eyes gleamed with the kind of knowledge that was rarely earned. "Honestly, Captain Adrian Vane," the stranger said smoothly, "I wondered how long it would take you to reach me." Vane's hand hovered near his cutlass. "And who in hell are you?" The man leaned forward, his voice low enough to be swallowed by the tavern's din. "I am the one who knows what you carry, and I am here to tell you the world will burn for it." Marlowe stiffened, his hand on the butt of his pistol, but Vane said nothing, only studied the man's face. The stranger's smile widened as if he saw what lay beneath Vane's silence. "You think you've stolen treasure, Captain, but what you hold is a map to the one place every empire dreams of finding. The Spanish call it La Fuente de the Fountain of Blood, a source of power and riches beyond imagination, and now it belongs to you." The words struck like thunder, but before Vane could speak, a pistol cracked across the room. The candlelight flickered, men shouted, and suddenly the tavern was a storm of steel and smoke. The stranger vanished into the chaos as blades flashed, tables overturned, and Vane found himself in the heart of yet another battle. And as he cut through the melee, blood hot in his veins, he knew one thing for certain: whatever lay ahead, it was no longer just survival, it was destiny. The Serpent's Fang burned with chaos, pistols cracking, cutlasses ringing, tankards shattering as men screamed and fell across the blood-slicked floor. And in the heart of it, Captain Adrian Vane moved like a shadow carved in steel, his blade flashing through smoke and lantern light, his crew rallying to him while old Marlowe's pistol boomed at his side. Yet even as the brawl raged, he kept his mind fixed not on the faceless assailants nor the spilled rum, but on the words the stranger had hissed before vanishing La Fuente de Sangre. The Fountain of Blood, a name so steeped in whispers and curses that even hardened corsairs spoke it with unease. And as Vane parried a strike and drove his cutlass home, he wondered if fate had placed in his hands not just a treasure map, but the seed of his doom. By the time the smoke thinned and the last attackers lay moaning or dead, the tavern was ruined, its tables splintered, its floorboards blackened, and Vane stood amid the wreckage, his breath ragged, his shirt torn, his crew bloodied but alive. the rest of Tortuga already spilling through the doors to gawk at the carnage. And from the far shadows, the stranger's absence loomed larger than his presence had, for he was gone like mist, leaving only questions and the echo of that cursed promise. Later, in the quiet of his cabin aboard the Morning Star, Vane unsealed the scroll he had hidden from his crew, unrolling the parchment across the desk while the lanterns swung with the rhythm of the sea. And there it was, lines and symbols inked in crimson, not quite Spanish nor Holy Latin, marked with strange sigils that seemed to shimmer in the flickering light. A path traced across islands known and unknown, winding ever inward toward a place unnamed. A place marked only by a blood-red sun sketched above jagged cliffs. And at the sight of it, Marlowe cursed low, crossing himself with trembling fingers. "It's a death warrant." "Captain," he rasped, his one good eye hard. "No map worth following, no prize worth dying for. The Spanish guard their secrets with teeth sharper than sharks. And I've heard men say, the fountain ain't water, but blood. The price it takes heavier than the gold it gives, but vain." His eyes locked on the parchment, felt the stirrings of something darker than greed, deeper than hunger, a call that seemed to whisper from the ink itself, promising not just riches but power, a way to stand above kings and slip free from the chains of betrayal forever. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low and resolute. "Every empire hunts it, Marlowe, yet none have held it twi. Should we not be the first?" And though the old sailor growled and muttered of devils, he did not leave, for he knew as well as Vane that once a captain's heart was set, the crew would follow, willingly or not. By dawn, the Morning Star slipped from Tortuga's harbor, her sails mended, her men wary but eager, their bellies full of stolen rum and their eyes sharp with the promise of plunder. Yet none knew the true nature of the course their captain set, only that he spoke of fortune beyond measure and enemies at every horizon. And as days bled into nights, the Caribbean spread before them, green islands rising from blue waters like emeralds scattered by giants, storms clawing the sky with lightning, rival ships shadowing them before vanishing into the mist. Until one evening, as the sun drowned in crimson haze, the lookout's cry pierced the air, "Sails! Spanish!" And thereupon the horizon loomed a galleon vast and bristling, its decks lined with cannon, its sails fat with wind. And from its mast flew the red and gold standard of Spain, its presence no accident, for they had been hunted, their secret betrayed already. The crew muttered with unease, but Vane strode the deck with fire in his veins, his cutlass flashing as he bellowed, "Run out the guns. Let them learn the Morning Star is no lamb for their slaughter." And the men roared, hauling cannon into place, powder and shot flying, the deck alive with fury. And when the first broadside thundered, the sea shook with violence. Splinters flew like hail, men screamed, and the night exploded into fire. The Morning Star, swift and nimble, darted across the waves, her cannons spitting flame into the galleon's flanks, smoke rolling across the sea like storm clouds. And amid the carnage Vane fought at the rail, his voice hoarse, his hand steady, every strike of cannon fire echoing the drumbeat of his resolve, until at last the galleon reeled, her masts shattered, her hull bleeding water, and the Spaniards cried for quarter, but Vane's eyes were ice as he gave the order. No quarter, send her to the depths, and the crew obeyed, their cannons roaring until the galleon split and groaned, sinking beneath the blood-red waves, her screams swallowed by the sea. Silence fell heavy after the last shot, broken only by the hiss of the dying fire and the ragged breath of survivors. And in that silence, Marlowe turned to Vane, his face pale, his voice a growl. "This ain't about gold anymore. Captain, you're chasing something that'll damn us all." But Vane only stared at the horizon, the map burning in his mind. The fountain's promise etched deeper with every heartbeat, and when he finally spoke, his words cut like iron. "Then let us be damned, Marlowe. But let us be damned as kings." And as the crew cheered, bloodied and wild, none saw the dark shape that slipped away into the mist behind them. Another ship, silent and watching, bearing no flag but black. The days that followed the destruction of the Spanish galleon were soaked in silence and dread. The morning star drifting across waters that seemed to darken with every passing mile, her crew restless, though rich with plunder, their eyes always darting to the horizon as if they expected death to rise from the waves at any moment. And Captain Adrian Vane felt the weight of their stares, though none dared voice what lay heavy on their tongues. For the secret he kept pressed against his chest, the blood-inked map that promised La Fuente de Sangre, was burning hotter than fire. And with every night he studied it beneath the swinging lantern in his cabin, tracing its crimson paths with calloused fingers. He felt more like a man possessed than a man in command. Old Marlowe watched him with that single, hawk-bright eye, muttering curses about devils and chains, yet never leaving his side. For loyalty bound him even as doom shadowed their wake. And soon the whispers among the crew grew louder, men gathering in dark corners to ask why they hunted not gold but phantoms, why they turned from easy prey to chase storms and reefs. And though they cheered in battle and feasted on stolen rum, unease gnawed at them like rats in the hull. One night, as the moon vanished behind clouds and the sea heaved like the chest of a dying beast, the lookout's cry pierced the dark sails, and all hands surged to the rail, their eyes straining to pierce the mist. And there it was, a shadow on the horizon, larger than any ship had right to be, moving with the silence of death, its sails black as midnight, its hull swallowed in mist. And though no colors flew, every man knew in his marrow what it was: a pirate hunter, a ghost ship of vengeance, sent not by kings alone but by the brotherhood of the sea itself. For the map Vane carried was no secret now. It was a beacon that drew sharks from every corner of the world. The crew muttered prayers, some clutching charms, others sharpening blades with trembling hands. But Vane's eyes gleamed in the lantern light, and he barked, "Run out the guns. If death comes hunting, we'll greet it with fire." And the morning star came alive with the drum of boots and the hiss of powder, the air charged with the scent of salt and iron, until at last the black ship loomed close, her lanterns guttering like the eyes of a demon, her decks crowded with men who bore no uniform but carried blades that glinted hungrily. And from her prow a figure stepped forth, cloaked and tall, his voice carrying across the waves with the calm of a man who had already won. "Adrian Vane," he called, "you sail with what belongs to Uskiv over the map, and I may let you keep your lives." And a shiver rippled through the crew, for they knew then that this was no common predator, but the same stranger who had whispered in Tortuga's tavern, now revealed not as a lone schemer, but as the hand of something larger, older, darker. Vane raised his cutlass high, his voice fierce as flame. "Tell your masters the map is mine, and I'll carve my fate in their bones before I bow." And with that defiance the cannons roared, thunder splitting the night, fire lighting the mist as iron screamed through wood and flesh. And the sea erupted into chaos, broadsides pounding, muskets flashing, grapples thrown, the two ships locked in a deadly embrace as men leaped rail to rail. Cutlasses flashing, pistols booming, blood spraying across slick decks. Vane fought like a man possessed, every strike of his blade fueled by the fire of destiny, his crew rallying around him with savage fury, while Marlowe, laughing like a mad prophet, shot and slashed with the desperation of a man who had long since accepted damnation. The stranger moved among the enemy like smoke, his sword striking with precision, his eyes always on Vane, and when at last their blades crossed amid the carnage, sparks flew in more than steel, for the stranger spoke even as he fought, his words cutting deeper than his blade. "You think the fountain will free you, Captain, but it will only bind you tighter. Takes more than it gives. It drinks more than it quenches, and it has claimed better men than you." Yet Vane, parrying blow after blow, spat back, "Then let it try to claim me, for I'll drink deep and laugh as I choke kings with its power." And with a roar he drove the man back, though not defeated, for the stranger only smiled, even as his ship groaned under fire, and with a signal he ordered his men to retreat, the black vessel pulling away into the mist with eerie calm, vanishing as quickly as it had come, leaving the Morning Star battered but afloat, her crew bloodied but victorious, though no cheer rose, only silence. For they knew this was no end but the beginning of a greater hunt. And as dawn broke crimson across the sea, Marlowe leaned close to Vane, his voice a whisper that carried like thunder. "You've drawn the eye of devils, Captain, and devils don't forget." But Vane only stared at the map laid open on his desk, his eyes hollow yet burning, and whispered back, "Then let them come. For the shadows on the horizon are mine to conquer." And though the crew feasted that night, drinking to false bravado, every man felt the same truth burning in his gut, that they had crossed a line from which there was no return, and whatever waited at the fountain's end would demand more than treasure, it would demand their souls. The Caribbean sun blazed white over the endless sea as the Morning Star limped forward, her timbers groaning with every wave, her sails patched but straining, her decks scrubbed of blood, though the stains clung in the cracks like ghosts that refused to leave, and the men moved with a heaviness that rum could not wash away. For they had fought shadows on the horizon, and though they had survived, they had not truly won, and each man knew in his marrow that the stranger who haunted them was not done, not defeated, only waiting for the next strike. Yet Captain Adrian Vane strode the deck as if he bore no fear, his gaze sharp, his jaw set, his hand never straying far from the scroll hidden in his coat. And every night when the crew drank themselves into forgetful stupor, he unrolled the blood-marked map by lantern light, tracing the crimson lines that led them ever deeper into waters uncharted, 2 islands marked only by jagged symbols, reefs that shifted like teeth in a predator's maw, until at last the path narrowed toward one place that chilled even his hardened heart. A cove drawn in ink so dark it seemed to drink the flame itself. Above it the sigil of a red sun dripping into waves, and though no name was written, Vane knew in his bones this was the place men whispered of with dread, the Fountain of Blood. Marlowe saw it too, his one eye gleaming with fury and fear. And one night he slammed his fist upon the desk and growled, "You drive us to death, Captain, chasing whispers and devils when the crew hungers for gold and rest. How long before they break? How long before they turn on you?" But Vane only stared into the map's crimson lines and said softly, "Let them turn, for mutiny cannot stop what is already mine." And his words hung like steel in the silence, for though Marlowe cursed, he did not leave, bound by loyalty or doom. And the next morning the course was set. Weeks bled together as the morning star sailed into waters that charts did not name. Storms clawing their masts with lightning, reefs tearing at their hull like claws. Strange islands rising with forests that screamed with unseen creatures. Until the men whispered they had sailed from the world of men into the maw of hell itself. And fear bred anger, anger bred whispers, until one night the whispers turned to Steelhoff, the crew gathering in secret. Blades drawn, led by men whose eyes burned not with loyalty but with hunger. And when the moon was high, they stormed the quarterdeck. Pistols and cutlasses flashing, crying out, "The map brings only death." Down with Vane, down with his cursed quest. And the deck erupted into chaos as brothers turned on brothers. Steel clashing in the moonlight, blood spilling across planks. The air thick with smoke and curses, and at the heart of it, Adrian Vane fought like a demon, his cutlass singing, his voice a roar. And beside him, Marlowe cracked skulls with the butt of his pistol, his laughter wild, until at last the mutineers broke, some cut down, others thrown screaming into the sea, their cries swallowed by the black waves, and silence fell heavy, broken only by the ragged breath of the survivors. Vane stood tall, his shirt torn and bloodied, his face pale but unyielding, and he raised the map high in his fist, shouting, "You think this parchment a curse, but it is our salvation. The fountain awaits, and with it the power to spit in the eyes of kings, to break every chain, to rule not as dogs of empires, but as masters of the sea." And though fear lingered in the crew's eyes, his fury cowed them, their voices rising in a ragged cheer, yet beneath it simmered resentment. For though they obeyed, they no longer followed with faith but with fear. The days after the mutiny bled with tension, men watching one another with suspicion, the ship creaking with the weight of distrust, and yet the map pulled them onward, until one dawn the lookout's cry split the still airland, and all eyes turned to see jagged cliffs rising from a storm-shrouded horizon, black stone dripping with red light from a sun that seemed to bleed into the sea itself. And the men fell silent, for the sight matched the mark on the map exactly. The place whispered of in curses and songs, and though their hearts thundered with dread, they knew they had reached Ither Fountain's shore. Vane gripped the rail, his eyes alight with fire, his voice steady as he commanded, "Drop anchor ready the longboats." And though Marlowe spat over the side, muttering of damnation, he obeyed, for the die was cast. And soon the boats cut across the waves, the crew rowing with grim faces, the surf pounding against black stone as they neared a narrow cove veiled in mist. And as they pulled ashore, the air grew thick, heavy with the stench of iron and salt. The jungle beyond alive with the cries of unseen beasts, the trees twisted like grasping hands, and the sand beneath their boots stained dark as if with old blood. They pressed inland, machetes flashing, cutting through vines that seemed to writhe as they fell, the jungles swallowing them in shadows until they stumbled into a clearing where stone ruins rose from the earth, worn by time but etched with sigils that matched those on the map. And at the center a pool lay still, its surface dark, yet shimmering faintly as if reflecting not the sky but something deeper, something alive. And the men froze, for they knew without words this was it, the fountain of blood. Vane stepped forward, his breath ragged, his eyes wide, as if every mile, every battle, every death had led to this moment. And when he knelt at the edge and touched the water, it rippled crimson, rising like liquid fire round his hand. And he gasped, for it was warm, too warm, like blood itself. And in that moment, a voice seemed to whisper from the depths, promising power. Endless power at a price, always a price. The men muttered prayers, some backing away, others stepping closer with hunger in their eyes. But before any could act, the jungle erupted with gunfire, muskets cracking, voices shouting in Spanish, and from the shadows poured soldiers in red and gold, their faces grim, their bayonets flashing, and at their head rode the stranger, his cloak torn, his smile sharp, his voice ringing. "Did you think you could reach it without me, Captain? The fountain belongs to those who know its cost, and you, Adrian Vane, will pay it first." And the clearing exploded into chaos, muskets firing, blades clashing, the air thick with smoke and screams, the fountain's surface boiling crimson as if drinking in the blood. And amid the carnage Vane raised his cutlass, his roar defiant even as the world collapsed around him. The question burning in every man's heart: would the fountain grant him dominion or damn them all? The clearing was a cauldron of fire and steel as the Spanish soldiers surged from the jungle, their muskets spitting smoke, their bayonets gleaming like a field of teeth. And the pirates of the Morning Star answered with pistols and cutlasses, their war cries ripping through the thunder of battle while the fountain shimmered in the center, its crimson waters pulsing as if alive, reflecting the chaos like a hungry mirror. And Adrian Vane fought at the heart of it all, his cutlass drenched in blood, his chest heaving, every strike driven not by greed alone but by a feral need to hold what he had bled and killed for, while Marlowe at his side laughed like a man already halfway to hell, his pistol booming, his blade flashing as he carved a path through the red-coated tide. But the stranger, cloaked and cold, moved among the Spanish like their shadow and their master both, his eyes fixed always on Vane, his smile sharp as if the carnage were but a game to him. And when at last their blades met again above the rippling fountain, the world seemed to narrow to the ring of steel, the rasp of breath, the hiss of whispers rising from the crimson pool. And the stranger spoke as if the battle did not rage around them. "You feel it, don't you? The fountain calls to you as it called to me, as it called to every fool who thought himself master of destiny, but it is no gift. Captain, it is a bargain, and every bargain with blood takes more than it gives." Vane snarled, parrying hard, sweat and blood mingling on his face. "Then I'll take all it has to give, and I'll make the seas tremble at my name." And he drove the stranger back, his fury rising, yet the man only laughed, twisting aside, his blade nicking Vane's arm as he whispered, "You think yourself free, but you've already bound yourself. You've chosen damnation, and the fountain will drink you dry." All around them, the clearing burned with violence. Pirates and soldiers locked in desperate struggle, the air thick with screams, smoke, and the stench of iron, until the fountain itself seemed to pulse brighter, its waters glowing red like molten glass. And in that glow, some men faltered, some fled, while others dropped to their knees, overcome with awe or madness, their hands dipping into the crimson surface only to shriek as if scalded, their flesh blistering where the liquid touched. And Marlowe, seeing this, shouted hoarsely to Vane, "It ain't salvation. Captain, it's the maw of hell itself." But Vane heard nothing save the roar of his own blood, the map's sigils burning in his mind. And when he saw the Spaniards begin to falter under pirate steel, he seized the moment, driving his enemy back toward the fountain's edge until at last, with a cry that tore the air, he struck the stranger's blade aside and hurled him against the stone rim. The man staggering but laughing still, his cloak torn, his smile undimmed. And in that moment Vane, his chest heaving, dipped his wounded hand into the fountain, the crimson liquid swallowing his flesh up to the wrist, and a shock like fire and ice surged through his veins, his vision blurring, his breath tearing as voices not his own screamed in his skull, promises of power, of endless life, of dominion over men and seas. But beneath it all, a hunger, vast and endless, drinking from him even as it filled him. And he ripped his hand free, gasping, his palms slick and steaming, the skin blackened where the water had touched. Yet his eyes burned brighter, his muscles surged with unnatural strength, and as the Spanish reeled, he roared like a beast, cutting them down in a frenzy that terrified even his own crew. The tide turned, the soldiers breaking, some fleeing into the jungle, others cut down before they could run, until at last the clearing fell silent, save for the moans of the dying and the heavy breath of the victors. And the fountain pulsed quiet once more, its crimson surface smooth as glass, as if it had swallowed the carnage with satisfaction. The pirates looked to their captain, their faces pale, their eyes filled with both awe and dread. For Vane stood in the glow of that cursed pool, his blackened hand clenched around his cutlass, his chest heaving, his gaze wild. And for the first time some whispered not his name but a word older and darker demon. Marlowe stepped forward, his face grim, his voice low. "You've taken its price, Adrian, you've let it brand you. Whatever it gave, it'll take back double. And when it does, it won't just be you that pays it all, be all of us." Vane turned on him, his eyes blazing, and snapped, "No, it gave me strength. And with it I'll break every chain, tear down every flag, and drown the crowns of Europe in their own blood. The fountain is mine, and so is the sea." And though the crew cheered, their voices ragged with exhaustion and fear, Marlowe only stared, his silence heavier than any curse. They burned the Spanish dead, their smoke rising black into the canopy. And when night fell, they camped around the fountain, though few dared sleep, the crimson glow casting shadows that twisted like living things. And in the small hours, Vane sat alone at the pool's edge, his reflection rippling dark, his blackened hand throbbing with pain and power, when from the jungle came a rustle and then a whisper, soft and mocking, and the stranger stepped forth once more. Not dead, not broken, but whole, his cloak drawn tight, his smile cold. "You see now," he murmured, "it feeds, it binds, it brands, and now you are marked as its servant, not its master. You think you've won, but you've only opened the door, and what comes through will devour more than you can imagine." Vane rose, cutlass raised, but before he could strike, the man melted into the shadows, gone as if he had never been, leaving only his laughter curling through the trees. And Vane, trembling though he would never admit it, turned back to the fountain, whispering through clenched teeth, "If I am damned, then let the world be damned with me." Yet even as he spoke, the jungle echoed with drums, distant but rising, the beat of 100 hands on hide, drawing nearer with every heartbeat, and the crew stirred in terror. For they knew those were not the drums of empire, but the war drums of the islands. And with the fountain's glow bathing their faces, they realized the battle was far from over, that they had awoken something older than Spain, older than crowns, older than piracy itself, and the jungle was marching to claim its due. The drums grew louder through the night, a steady thunder that shook the ground beneath the pirates' boots, rising and falling like the heartbeat of the jungle itself. And the men of the Morning Star stood with blades drawn, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow, for they had faced warships and storms, kings and betrayals. But never had they felt the weight of something this ancient pressing down upon them. And Adrian Vane, standing before the crimson fountain with his cutlass in one hand and his blackened, burning hand in the other, felt the rhythm not in his ears but in his bones, each beat calling to the cursed mark that now throbbed with unholy fire, binding him tighter to the pool's promise, its hunger, its lies. And when the first torches appeared at the tree line, the clearing seemed to shrink, the shadows dancing long and jagged as figures emerged. Painted warriors of the islands clad in feathers and bone, their eyes blazing with fury, their spears tipped in obsidian, their drums carried by youths who struck them with relentless power. And behind them walked elders cloaked in smoke, their chants rising in a language older than empire, a curse upon trespassers, a hymn to the fountain that had long been theirs. The pirates, weary and shaken, formed a ragged circle, pistols raised, cutlasses ready, Marlowe at Vane's side, muttering, "We should never have come here, Captain. We've spat in the mouth of gods, and gods don't forgive." But Vane's eyes burned like coals as he snarled, "No gods, no kings, only power, and I'll take it all." And with a roar he raised his cutlass high, the fountain's glow spilling across his face like the mask of a demon, and the battle began. Spears whistled through the air, muskets boomed. The clearing erupted into chaos once more, the pirates firing and slashing, the warriors charging with cries that shook the leaves, obsidian biting through flesh, steel flashing in answer, the drums never ceasing even as their bearers fell, pounding like the voice of the fountain itself. And amid the storm Vane moved like a beast unleashed, his blackened hand striking men down with unnatural strength, his blade carving through warriors with terrifying fury. And each time blood spilled into the crimson pool, the waters rippled brighter, hungrier, as if feasting on the carnage. Marlowe fought with grim ferocity, his laughter gone now, replaced with curses spat at fate itself, his pistol empty, his cutlass slick, shouting to his captain even as he cleaved another foe, "You're feeding it, Adrian. Every life, every drop, it's drinking us into its maw." But Vane only roared back, "Then let it drink, for I am its master." Though in truth his vision swam, his veins burned, and deep inside he felt the fountain's hunger pulling, binding, whispering promises of endless life if only he gave it more, always more. The warriors pressed, wave after wave, fearless in their fury, and the pirates dwindled, their numbers cut, their cheers faltering, until at last the elders stepped forth, their chants rising to a fever pitch, their staffs striking the earth in unison, and the fountain boiled, crimson waves leaping, a column of red mist rising as if the pool itself had awakened fully. And in that moment the stranger appeared again, striding through fire and blood as if untouched by either, his cloak torn, his smile sharp, his voice calm amid the storm. "This is the price. Captain, the fountain does not give, it only takes. And now it takes you." And before Vane could answer, the crimson mist coiled around him, tendrils of blood wrapping his limbs, dragging at his chest, pulling him toward the pool's heart. And the crew cried out in terror, some fleeing, some trying to hack at the mist with their blades to no avail, while Marlowe, bleeding from a dozen wounds, seized Vane's arm with all his failing strength, shouting, "Don't let it take you, boy, fight it, damn you, fight it." But Vane's blackened hand was already sinking into the pool, his cutlass falling from his grip, his eyes blazing with both terror and ecstasy as visions consumed him, crowns crumbling, seas bowing, his name carved into eternity. But beneath it all, the laughter of the fountain, endless and hollow, and with a final, ragged cry he vanished beneath the surface, swallowed whole by crimson fire. Silence fell in the clearing. The drums stilled, the warriors frozen, the pirates broken, and the pool smoothed as if nothing had ever disturbed it, reflecting the stars coldly, indifferently, until at last Marlowe collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, his face carved with despair, muttering, "The devil's tide has claimed him, and we are all damned with him." And the stranger, standing at the fountain's edge, looked down with his thin smile and whispered, "Not damned, old man reborn." And as the survivors staggered back, the pool rippled once more, and from its depths rose a figure drenched in crimson, his eyes burning not with humanity but with something deeper, older, endless, his blackened hand now fully consumed, his flesh alive with veins of glowing red. And when he opened his mouth, his voice was no longer wholly his own, but the whisper of the fountain itself, promising storms, death, and dominion. And the men who saw him fell to their knees, some in worship, others in terror, for Adrian Vane was no longer merely a pirate, no longer merely a man. He was the vessel of the fountain, the devil of the tide, and the seas would never be the same again.